Eunice Kathleen Wayman is today's inspiration. Began playing at the age of 3 or 4 years old. She performed at her local church and in her concert debut, a classical recital, when she was 12. She watched her parents take their seats in the front row. Excitingly, the parents mooned over their genius child. And then, because it was 1947 in North Carolina, and because people are racist and the institutions of racial inequality was in full bloom, she watched as her parents were forced to move to the back of the hall to make way for white audience members. That moment, and the summer of 1950, when she was a student at Juilliard, preparing for an audition at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. And when she went and applied, she was a genius, but an accomplished classical pianist. Her application to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia was denied. These moments shaped her. Her family had relocated to Philadelphia in expectation of her entry to Curtis. She wanted to be a classical pianist. She wanted the world to see the first really successful black female classical pianist. This was the turning point in her life. Heartbroken, she turned another way. She would not accept this form of poverty as 18th century economist Adam Smith had described 200 plus years before, the kind where poverty is the feeling of being unseen, unheard, unrecognized. She would not accept being placed out of sight, moved to the back of the hall, told that she could not shine with all the talent that she had, told that no one would take notice of her. She would have to reset her dreams. She did not accept this. I believe those two moments turned her into the fierce, black, empowerment female musician that she was to become. Because she pivoted like Kristi Yamaguchi in the 1992 Olympics. She turned from Chopin to Ellington and Strayhorn and started playing like she had met the devil at the crossroads. Knowing her Methodist preacher mother would not approve of playing the devil's music, Eunice Kathleen Wayman died, and Nina Simone was born. She became an instant hit in Atlantic City and beyond. She went on to record Gershwin's I Loves You, Porgy from Porgy and Bess. It became her only Billboard Top 20 success in the U.S., and her debut album, Little Girl Blue, followed in February 1959. And again, racism rose its head. She was convinced to sell her rights to the album for $3,000. Simone lost more than $1 million in royalties and never benefited financially from the album's sales. Friends, this is how systemic racism works in America. Black bodies work and are paid off, and others gain. And she would remain in financial straits all her life. Nina Simone would not be ignored. She rampaged through her career, playing for audiences in the U.S. and in Europe. She turned her rage into power. On stage, she demanded to be addressed as an African queen. She demanded audiences treat her with respect. She even stopped concerts to tell people to sit down and listen. And she talked to her black audiences about their power and their dignity. If you haven't seen the film Summer of Soul and watched her performance, you have not lived. She was like a lioness roaring at her cubs to wake up and claim their power in that park in 1969 in Harlem. She would not be ignored, pressed down, or confined. When others said to her, "You are a failure, you are unimportant," she refused to respond, "I am a disgrace, I am nobody." Instead, she famously said, "You've got to learn to leave the table when love's no longer being served." You got that? She said, I have to constantly re-identify myself to myself, reactivate my own standards, my own convictions about what I'm doing and why. I have to constantly re-identify myself to myself and reactivate my standards. Sounds like spiritual advice to a Unitarian Universalist church. Now, part of her story, maybe part of her inspiration, is something you probably don't know about Nina Simone, something we often don't know about each other. And that was that she also struggled with mental illness. She was bipolar, which appeared as rage-filled outbursts or joyful outbursts. She had an inner struggle that would surface throughout her life. It would end up breaking up relationships and have her doing things she didn't even want her to do. Not in control and maybe not willing or able to get the kinds of medications we have today, she committed acts of violence. She threatened people with a gun and shot her neighbor once. There were moments of violence in her life she might have taken back had she gotten help, admitted to her illness, had access to good medical care and mental health care. And the story here is that she did not surround herself with those who could help her or acknowledge that she was out of control. So I want to just pause for a moment here and acknowledge how difficult this can be. How challenging to have a disease that alters one's behavior and mind, or alters the mind of someone you love and care for. And I want to say to anyone here who has struggled with mental illness or helped a family member do so, that we don't have to go as far as looking for an inspiring artist of the past to know that it is true and difficult, that to surround yourself with those who can help is the best way forward. And I want to say to you that if you need us, we are here. That's what a church does. And you don't have to hide. Through all her courage, through all her ferocity, Nina Simone was navigating in her life so much. And she was navigating her life through a world that was so much, would not let her go. The fact is that we are better for it, though. Because despite of her challenges, she was also a fierce voice for change. She spoke plainly and directly and almost cynically at times about our ability to heal from racism. And she didn't hide her bitterness about it. She didn't hide her personal experiences or the moments that changed the course of her life. She spoke with her body. On stage, she would sway to the drum beats and speak poetically about being black and beautiful and proud. And she said to those who would listen, I am worthy, I am significant, I am intelligent. We saw in this video that we just watched today in her song, Mississippi Goddamn. I'm not going to take it anymore, she was saying. Did you feel the controlled rage in that song? The context for this song was the murder of Medgar Evers in Mississippi and the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama and the attacks of vicious dogs on nonviolent freedom fighters throughout the South. If there is a song that both encapsulates Nina Simone and the time that she lived in, this is the one. After hearing of the Birmingham bombing, she told the story of the song. She said, "At first I tried to make myself a gun." She's not saying, "I tried to make myself a gun." She said, "I tried to make a gun. I gathered some materials. I was going to take one of them out." She said, "I didn't care who it was. And then my husband said to me, 'Nina, you can't kill anyone. You're a musician. Do what you do.' And then I sat down and the whole song happened. I never stopped writing until the thing was finished." She said, "This song was my first civil rights song. In some ways, it was the first battle cry for the civil rights movement." The song says, "There is freedom when we do not fear," and calls out the truth of the times. Simone's protest anthem, "Mississippi Goddamn," says, "I don't trust you anymore. You keep on saying, go slow, but that's just the trouble," she sang. Pulling from the past and invoking the present, she was speaking to what is yet to come if America does not enact real social change, and we are living in that time. To speak these words of hers on the Sunday before Juneteenth is to acknowledge how far we have come and how little we have accomplished. In 1863, those enslaved people in Galveston, just 370 miles from where we are sitting, those who celebrated, who somehow heard of the emancipation, were beaten and told they were not free. They were lied to. And they were locked again in slavery for 2 more years. So today in Black communities, it is a celebration for sure to acknowledge Juneteenth. It is a day to celebrate Black empowerment movements and artists like Nina Simone, who called for revolution. And I think it has another side which it symbolizes. That was the distrust which is built into our misunderstandings of each other as we base our lives on racial identities. How this plays out today and in the 60s and in every decade reaching back to 1865 is that there is a distrust built into the system to divide and conquer us and keep us afraid of each other based on our race. It reminds us that freedom didn't really mean equality, that forces of segregation and economic control kept and keep Black communities from true emancipation, and where one is not free, we are all not free. We have been locked in this distrusting and often violent relationship ever since. But Nina would say to us, don't give up. Don't sit back. Sure, celebrate, but also work for change. Nina said an artist's duty is to reflect the times. And at this crucial time in our lives when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved, she said. The song, "I don't trust you anymore. You keep saying, go slow, but that's the trouble." Friends, one of the Birmingham bombing perpetrators wasn't convicted until 14 years after the attack. 2 others weren't jailed until 38 years after the bombing. And the 4th died before even being charged. Go slow, that's the trouble, she said. At the end of her life, she had changed jazz and protest songs and stood centrally as a queen of Black empowerment and confrontation. Not looking back at the rejections, the messages of worthlessness she received, she refused to accept them. Chased by unpaid taxes, she went to live in Barbados and Liberia and France. And at the end, she suffered from breast cancer for several years before she died in her sleep at her home in France in April of 2003. 2 days before her death, Nina got a note from a letter from the Curtis Institute of Music saying that she had been awarded an honorary degree, a degree from the music school that refused to admit her at the beginning of her career. What did she say in my Mississippi? Goddamn, why don't you see it? Why don't you feel it? I don't know. Too slow. Nina asks us what revolutions we are ready to be part of. Friends, revolutions come in celebrations. Celebrations of freedom and power and beauty like tomorrow's Juneteenth. And they come in commitments to help real people like the one I have made and this church has made to not stop helping people who want to get abortions in other states. They come in commitments to address racial equity like this church has made and works on every day. And we have work to do on many other revolutions. Work to do on bringing our values to conversations like the conversation about gun violence. We live in a state where 60% of homes have at least one gun, one of the highest rates in the country. We live in a place where we're getting and owning handguns has been deregulated. Supporters of the 2021 legislation in our state that made it so easy to walk into a place and get a gun if you're 18 or older, removing the licensing requirements. Supporters of that legislation said at the time they are removing an artificial barrier to residents' right to bear arms under the Constitution, ensuring more Texans have access to protection of themselves and their families in public. I don't care if you love guns or you don't love guns, if you own guns or you don't own guns. The facts are in, friends. In the 1 year before the bill was signed, 187 people were killed or injured in mass shootings in Texas. In the 1 year after the legislation was signed, 375 people were killed in our state. That's 100% increase. Jim over here wants me to go occupy the State House about this. I'm saying he needs to go. Revolution? I'm sure you have topics, right? You got things you want to work on or join up on. The point of all this is to say that from Juneteenth to 1865 to today, no one is really free. No one is free from the systems of racial prejudice or hatred or violence in our society or legislation that makes it easy to go out and shoot somebody. But, Nina is there. She inspires us, saying, do not give up, friends, no matter what. There are revolutions to be made every day, challenges to change that is too slow. And above all, when it feels like we can't control or change anything, you are there. The more I listened to Nina and read about her life and watched the videos of her performances, the more I saw through all the cantankerousness and impatience and rage, there was a clear clarion call that said, friends, you may have lost so much in your life. You may have been beaten down. You may have lost elections, lost fights with your friends, lost your way, lost a sense of purpose. But what you have when you lose all things is your integrity and your body and your soul and your freedom, because no one can trap your spirit when you let it out, when you let it sing. And Nina sang. She sang a song that I think sums up her life, her struggle, her loss, her gain, her fame, her fortune. In important ways, she sang this song that claimed her rightful place in society. She sang famously, "Ain't got no home, ain't got no shoes, ain't got no money, ain't got no place to stay, ain't got no love, ain't got no God, but let me tell you what I've got that nobody's gonna take away. I got my hair on my head, I got my brains, I got my ears and eyes, I got my nose and my mouth, I got my smile and my tongue. And maybe more importantly, I got my heart, I got my soul. I got my back, I got my blood, I got my life, I got my life." In 1968, in Juan-le-Pin in France, she sang, "I got my freedom in my heart, I've got my life, I got my life." Young, gifted, and black, Nina Simone changed the hearts, chased racism from the corners of her life, and demanded to be recognized. Adam Smith said the rich man was rich because he wanted to be observed, to be seen. Nina was rich, never financially, but she was rich in her heart, in her integrity, and in her soul. She may never had any money, but she had life and she had freedom like you.